Today we're going to be talking about all the books I've read in 2025 so far. Really exciting. I've been waiting for this video. I can't believe we're basically halfway through the year, which is kind of insane, but nonetheless, I read a decent amount of books. I think I've read about 25-ish. I'm not even sure. We're just gonna go through all of them and we're gonna talk about everything I've read so far. If you've been sticking around, you probably have heard of me talk about a lot of these books in past videos. If you're new, or if you just want to listen to everything in bulk, this is the video. We're just gonna get straight into it because we have quite a few to get through. I previously had everything organized by order, but everything got jumbled up, so I'm just gonna like pick everything from the piles as we go along. Let's start off with this because it's just screaming at me, and I think it's one of my favorite books I've read so far this year, and that is The Story of the Lost Child by Elena Ferrante. This book really, it's the final book from the new Poetic quartet, if you didn't know, which is an amazing series, probably my favorite set of books ever. It is truly a miracle of a literary endeavor, and I think everyone should read it at some point in their lives. This book, probably one of my favorites from the series. I think the second one stays on top, but this is a really close second. I think having this being the final one where they're at their very mature age and looking back through their life and having this very mature outlook on everything and how, you know, career, their womanhood, their relationships all kind of collectively come together and intertwine. It was so beautifully written. I cried so much at the end. I think having to read that final paragraph over and over again to really come to terms with what I've just read, it was just very emotionally raw and reflective and very mature, and it was a beautiful conclusion to their lives. It hurt me and it was just so well done. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars. I can't get over it to this day. Like, next. Here we go. Babel. I read this one a couple months back? I'm not even sure, but I discussed a lot about my thoughts on this in a past video. I think it was, I don't even remember, but in another video. But I had mixed feelings about this. I think it was good. I enjoyed it overall, but I did find that at times it was a bit hard to get through. So basically, Babel follows along this group of students that study at Oxford. They study languages and translation, and basically a lot of shit happens, you know, like death. It discusses a lot about the ethics and morals of the impacts of colonization on language and translation and all of that. It was very interesting. It's in that sort of dark academia realm with a bit of, I guess, fantasy, sci-fi in it. It was entertaining for the most part. I think I enjoyed the first half of it more, but I think with Kwang's writing, a lot of the time she kind of tells you everything, which I don't particularly enjoy as much. And it did felt like she was putting out a lot of her own personal feelings and discourse as a writer rather than sticking to the tone and the mood of the characters itself, where it just kind of took me out. It just felt a bit disjointed at times. I understand the critique, but it did feel at times a bit just annoying to read, if that makes sense. But anyways, I think I gave this 4 stars because I think overall it was good. But I just think the writing style for me kind of took me out a bit. Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson. This book was beautiful. It was a masterpiece. It follows an affair between this unnamed narrator, but in my interpretation of it, it was these 2 women who have an affair, and then there's the husband who's kind of a background character that's in there, kind of making everything so much more complex. But it was so beautiful, so poetic. It truly is the sort of book that really looks into love and yearning and poetry, and it was just so well done. It was quite emotional as well, especially towards the end. I think I mentioned if you enjoyed sort of Call Me By Your Name and that sort of vibe, I think this is a good book for you to get into. I feel like you would really enjoy this. My soul. I loved it. Next, I'm gonna pick a book from this pile. Oh, The Death of Francis Bacon by Max Porter. This is a very tiny book. I read this in one sitting just before bed. It's a very sort of abstract and deconstructed way of, I guess, telling a somewhat narrative style interpretation of Francis Bacon's paintings. And it's quite dark, kind of scary, to be honest. It's very eerie and violent because of the writing style. It's very sort of avant-garde. I really loved reading this in bed, like late at night. I did have nightmares because of it. It was really good nonetheless. I really enjoyed this. If you're interested in art and interpretation of art through narrative, this is a great book to just pick up on a weekend and just read it all at once. I loved this. This was really cool. Another book that I really loved was The Philosophy of Andy Warhol by Andy Warhol. This is, I guess, a sort of autobiography that he did, but he dives into various topics on life, pop culture, and his sort of perspectives on various things, and I thought it was quite witty. It was funny. He's just a really cool person. I think he's the epitome of cool, and the way he writes was very easy to get through, but it was also so interesting to see such a sort of nonchalant, I guess it could be a way to call his sort of tone, but I don't know, I just thought it was so fun and it's so interesting. And it's very also telling of its time, which I think it's so cool. You're gonna get transported into that era and you get to live through his eyes, which I thought was really fun. And I really loved it. I love Andy Warhol. I love art. So next, let's dive back into dark academia because I read If We Were Villains by Emil Rio this year. Because it was something I was very much anticipating, but I was also scared to pick up because of my love for The Secret History, and I was scared that I was gonna be left disappointed and kind of underwhelmed because of its similarities. But I really liked this. I gave this 4 stars. I shed some tears. I thought there are many parallels to Donna Tartt's The Secret History, but this follows this group of students studying Shakespeare at this college, and there ends up being a murder, and it follows them dealing with the sort of moral and ethical implications of it all, whilst also having these sort of continuous Shakespeare references that really play into, you know, implicit ideas that foreshadow certain things. I just thought it was really interesting. It was really fun. I think it was refreshing to have this book to read because I was craving something like The Secret History. I wanted to be in that sort of dark, eerie, academic atmosphere, but I wasn't really in the state to dive into The Secret History because it's so in-depth and intense. So this is like a shorter, much more simplified sort of version of that, but it still exists on its own. You know what I mean? I still, I can acknowledge that this is a work of literature in itself, separate from The Secret History. But I thought it was good. I thought it was fun, just not as in-depth character-wise compared to The Secret History, but also just fun nonetheless. If you want something dark academia, this is great. And I took quite a few notes, and I dove into a lot of Shakespeare's works that I haven't read yet, but it was interesting to look into that. But anyways, in talking about Shakespeare, we're just gonna mention Hamlet because I read Hamlet earlier in the year. Loved it. I love Shakespeare. Surprisingly enough, I managed to really understand Shakespearean language without having to look at translations and such, which is very refreshing, very fun, because I used to have a lot of trouble understanding Shakespeare back in high school. But I loved this. I wish there was more Ophelia in it, but like many of Shakespeare's things, just deals a lot with, the sort of tragedy and miscommunication, loyalty, vengeance, etc., etc. Ooh, another one I read, which I really loved, was The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I can't remember how to pronounce the author's name, but this is a classic and I absolutely loved it. This is basically the epitome of yearning. I read White Nights. I thought that was, yearning to the max. This is more, I believe. Oh, don't fall, please. It follows this man, Werther, and it's a series of letters that's kind of addressed to you, so you feel very included as a reader, but it follows his telling and his life yearning for this woman that he can't have, and then he falls into this sort of deep depression, yearning for this woman, and he ends up dying. But I thought it was so beautiful, somewhat easy to get through, to be honest, given it's a classic. But if you're into romance but you don't want to deal with contemporary romance, because these days it's kind of like a tricky line, but this is a great book to be in if you want something very much sort of cozy, warm, full of love and yearning, but it's also kind of sad and melancholic. I think this is a good book to read during autumn. If you go outside into a forest or a park, This is actually a really good book to read there. I read this in bed in like a day, but I really liked that book. I think it was very well done. Another more modern classic is Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I'm trying. But if you're into philosophy, if you like existentialism like me, this is sort of a book that dives into just that. It kind of dapples, it deals with, I think it's a series of sort of journals. It follows this writer, and I guess it's a sort of journal entry style book, and it tackles him coming to terms with the fact that he exists in a meaningless world and he is full of agency to do whatever he wants. It just follows his train of thought and his consciousness dealing with this sort of existentialist mindset, and I thought it was brilliant. It is so good. I took many notes. It was beautiful. And I think the way that he used this sort of concept of nausea to express that sort of deep, unsteady feeling of coming to terms with the fact that you exist in a world devoid of meaning was very, very well done. I felt it in me, you know? Next, Nothing Special by Nicole Flattery. This book it's a contemporary literary fiction, and it follows this young woman who decides to leave home and she transcribes audio files for Andy Warhol, and it's her dappling with, you know, growing up as this very young woman, trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life, and her meeting these other women who also work at this office transcribing. And it's set in the sort of 60s, yeah, mid 60s. And I actually quite enjoyed this. It was quite easy to read and it was kind of fun. It felt like you were very much just transported to that era, and it was just so cool. It was very raw and authentic, in my opinion. I really enjoyed this. If you just like reading about girls figuring themselves out in the 60s era with little tinges of Andy Warhol sprinkled in there, this is a fun and easy book to get through. I'm gonna switch back to this side because I read Kudos by Rachel Cusk, and if you know me, you know I love Rachel Cusk with all my soul. And this is the final book from the trilogy, and absolutely loved it. It's a continuation from the previous two books, but it follows this woman who is traveling, and it's a series of conversation and reflections on life, motherhood, being a writer, and just observations and meeting people and the intricacies of human relationships. And a lot of the time Rachel Cusk's writing has this sort of underlying philosophical tone to it, which I really enjoy, but it's very modern and very contemporary. I just absolutely love her writing style, and I thought it was great. I love reading just about people and about life, so I highly recommend the trilogy series if you're interested in that. And like always, I get through Rachel Cusk's books so fast because I literally cannot put them down ever. To switch things up, The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford. I think this was the first book I finished of the year, and to be honest, I don't have much to say about it. I found it quite forgettable. I was just it was a very sort of passive reading experience. It follows a sort of family and their sort of relationships with each other and their pursuit for love, as you can tell by the title. But I found it just quite forgettable. I didn't really care much for the character. That didn't form any sort of emotional connection to it. So yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of mid, and I don't have much to say about it because I found it so forgettable, and it didn't leave much of a mark on me. So anyways, another book I read this year was Nadia by Andre Breton. I loved this book. It is a piece of surrealist modern classic literature. It follows this man who becomes sort of very obsessed, or I guess very intrigued by this woman that he meets on the street, and it's a very odd, it is very surrealist the way that he describes the world and his emotions and this love and this obsession for this woman. But I thought it was so cool, and the way that surrealism as an art form was incorporated throughout this was great. And I think at the time when I was reading this, many of the points made throughout this went very hand in hand with a piece, like a painting that I was working on, and I wanted to make note of them and how I can translate these ideas through my paintings. So I thought this was really great. I read this also in a day. It was just so well done. So if you're interested in picking up something more abstract, I guess, in its writing style, this is great, especially if you enjoy art and classic literature and things like that. Another one, This is 2 books in one, but I read Murakami's Wind and Pinball duology. I enjoyed it because I just found it kind of funny and humorous, and I think the language of these characters was just sort of cool and just they don't really give a fuck type of vibe, and it just follows them sort of being reckless men, I guess, to an extent. But surprisingly enough, I picked up this book because my friend is in a band called Pinball 1973, which comes from this book. So I was like, I'm gonna read it because surely I have to, you know? So I read this. I actually read this in Japan, which is kind of fun. But I don't know, the obsession for pinballs kind of came in later in the book. And I was always very hesitant to pick up a Murakami book because people were always saying that the way that he writes his women characters is very much like, look at this walking piece of flesh with boobs, oh my god, you know what I mean? It is very much like that, which was kind of annoying to read, but I think it did go very hand in hand with the nature of the characters because they are just kind of annoying, insufferable men who have this very weird relationship with these twins at some point. I don't know. It was interesting, but I think I probably enjoyed different Murakami books that are a bit more emotionally in depth, but I'm not sure when I'm gonna get to that. It's not in my priority right now. Ooh, one book that I did really enjoy was Lost on Me by Veronica Raimo. Again, if you're very interested in Elena Ferrante's work and, you know, Italian life and the sort of familial dynamics, friendship, and girlhood and growing up, this is a great book to pick up as well, in my opinion. It follows Vero and her life growing up in Rome, and she just kind of goes through and dissects her life as she grows older and matures and reflects back on her relationship with her family and her upbringing in this environment. And I just thought it was so good. It's very much reminiscent of Ferrante's work, and if you're interested in that, I very much recommend this. It was longlisted for the International Booker Prize. I thought it was really great, and I think the sort of reflective points that are made about life and womanhood are always so vivid, especially in Italian literature. So I very much recommend that book. Next, another one I read was Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. I love Japanese literature and especially really love Kawakami's work. I've read All the Lovers in the Night and Breasts and Eggs a few years back, and I absolutely loved them. I think Kawakami's writing is very bittersweet and very emotive and poignant. And I picked this up, and it follows these 2 students, these young students who deal with a lot of bullying, and it follows their sort of friendship that blooms from this sad and horrible experience that they have. And they kind of break down their own identities, and they're trying to figure out why they're so targeted by these people. It's very brutal and it's very honest, and it was quite violent at times, especially because this follows children and bullying. It got very intense, and it was a bit difficult to read and to just picture that in my mind because her writing is so vivid. But I thought it was great. I thought it was really good, but just keep in mind that it can get quite difficult to read because it gets so intense. Another one, Blue Nights by Joan Didion. 5 stars, perfection. You have to be ready for tears because you will cry a lot reading this. I read this in one day. It deals with Didion grappling with the death of her daughter and her motherhood and her sort of dealing with grieving her daughter and her upbringing, and it focuses a lot on that sort of life, and I just thought it was so beautifully written. It was so well done, but it is very sad. But I just love Didion's writing. I think she's a very honest writer, and I think the essence of her writing just feels so mature. I loved this book. 2 other books that I read The Witch by Shirley Jackson, which is a short story that I just bought for $2 on my phone because I was traveling and I didn't have a book with me at one point, and I really just wanted to read something because I was trapped inside because it was really cold out. So I just bought that on Apple Books and I just read that. Not much to say about that. It was just a sort of very eerie, little short story about this kid who has a weird interaction with this creepy person on a train. But yeah. And then I listened to the audiobook version of Night Bitch but if I'm being honest, I was kind of disappointed in that book. I had seen it before and I've heard about it being in that sort of realm of very weird, like messed up books about unhinged women, which I always love, but I was slightly disappointed. Maybe the experience of listening to the audiobook version may have impacted me because, you know, you're listening to this voice reading this out, but it just got kind of insufferable to read about this woman. I think the way she talked was kind of, you know, it's just a white woman complaining all the time type of vibe, and I don't know, it just fell flat for me. I did enjoy some of like the weird unhinged bits about it, and it follows basically this woman going crazy over being a mother and her sort of life as a stay-at-home mom, also trying to grapple with work and things like that, and then she slowly starts to turn into a dog. I don't know, it just fell flat to me and it kind of got annoying to deal with, and I just wanted it to end because she just complained the whole time. Another one, Time is a Mother by Ocean Vuong. It's a poetry collection. I've talked about this book as well. I thought it was beautiful. I think you do have to be somewhat familiar with Vuong's other works, I think, to enjoy this more, which I'm not. So I do want to get into his other pieces of writing, but I thought that was quite beautifully done. There were some poems in there that I was just kind of about because I did find them sort of difficult to grasp and understand because of his style and the lack of punctuation in some of the poems, but many of them I quite enjoyed. It is quite emotional and it's very dense. I do need to read his other works, I think, to truly understand, because I think it deals a lot with his like losing his mother and his relationships as a queer person, and I just thought it was really cool. I really liked it, but I think I would have enjoyed it more if I had read his other things before diving into that. Let's see. Ooh, this is a newer release, Didion and Babbitts by Lily Analick. I was expecting more from it. I was slightly disappointed with it. This book is very much biased toward Babbitts, and oftentimes Analick, she's kind of resents Didion at times, and she has this sort of intense dislike towards Didion, which, you know, I think the way that she wrote about Didion felt kind of disrespectful given that she's such a literary marvel. But nonetheless, I did find it quite interesting to read about Babbitts, and I do want to get into Babbitts' writings as well. It just kind of, I was a bit taken aback by the way that she would write about Didion, which wasn't that much even. I was just expecting more. It just felt like a very biased fan rage about Babbitts a lot of the time. But it was still interesting to read so much about this time and what was going on with their lives and that timeline. But yeah, I was slightly disappointed about this because I was so excited to get this when I did find it. But that's my honest truth. And I think a lot of people do agree with that. I read some people's reviews on it and we were all on the same page, luckily. So I'm not going crazy. Oh. Another book I read was Kairos by Jenny Eppenbeck. This was the winner for the International Booker Prize last year, and it's translated from German, and it follows this woman who has an affair with this man that she meets on a train, and they have a sort of very interesting age gap type of relationship, and it follows that and them grappling with each other and the conflicts, the ups and downs of it all in this under this political climate of Berlin in the 80s. I don't know how I feel about it. I think I enjoyed many parts of it, but then I also got to a point where it was just getting stretched out a lot and it started to fall flat to me, and I started to not really care that much about it. It felt a bit excessive at times, and I just wanted it to end at some points. But I don't know, it was interesting, but I was also expecting a lot more given that it won the International Booker Prize. It was okay. Like, it was fun for a lot of it and I enjoyed reading it, but I also was just kind of, it plateaued a bit. Next is Homesick for Another World by Otessa Majveg. I love Otessa's writing, if you know me. I love her books, and this is a short story collection that grapples with exactly that. They're very bizarre and kind of odd, and Majveg has this sort of tendency to write very problematic and intense and fucked up characters and happenings. And all these stories kind of connect together with this sort of desire for characters that want a distant life, a different life, and they are just homesick for another world. I thought it was great. It was incredibly entertaining. I couldn't put this down. I just wanted to keep reading more and more and more because I just enjoy sort of messed up and weird stories, and I just love her writing style. So I do highly recommend this, especially if you want to get into Mushfeg's writing. I think it's a great introduction into her work and her style, and it kind of eases you in to her other books, in my opinion. And there were many parts of that book that I saw in her other writings as well. Another modern classic, which is An Apprenticeship or The Book of Pleasures by Clarice Lispector. I've grown to very much love Lispector's writing because it is much more abstract and poetic, and she kind of challenges the sort of standard for what writing can be. She really pushes the boundaries for that, and I really enjoy her writing. It follows Lottie and her connection with this professor and their sort of love for each other, and it was quite beautiful. It kind of tackles this sort of idea of self-love and breaking down what it is to be human and to have connections within yourself and with other people. And I just thought it was a very interesting breakdown of that, and it's very human in itself, in its essence. So she's a very beautiful soul. Like, if I were to describe her writing and her as a writer, her soul would be a beautiful bouquet of flowers, if you know what I mean. A very beautiful exploration of human and tackling with the self and what it means to form a connection with another person. Another book, another classic, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. I didn't know what to expect because with this book, people either hate it or they love it. I enjoyed it. Will I read it again? Probably not. I don't have any drive to, maybe in the future. But it is a great breakdown of this sort of, American dream. I think I really enjoyed how the scenery was set and the sort of opulence that came with Gatsby's parties and this sort of era of the Roaring 20s. I thought it was great. It was very much Art Deco vibes, and yeah, I was very entertained by these characters and the sort of relationships they had with each other. It's very dramatic, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. Nothing spectacular, in my opinion, but it also wasn't bad. It wasn't that boring to read, and it wasn't that hard, because I know people truly hate this book for some reason. But I thought it was good. And lastly, this is one of the more recent books that I've read, and that is The Bookshop Woman by Nanako Hanada. And it follows this woman who works at this bookshop, and she dives into she recently separates from her husband, and she gets into this matchmaking website, and she starts meeting all these new people through this website as an older woman, and she develops this habit for really breaking down these different people's characters and recommending very niche books to them. And it follows her just grappling with that, and what does she want in life after separating from a husband? Does she want to get into a relationship, etc.? I thought it was cute. It was very easy. It has this sort of very bittersweet atmosphere to it. I think it was a very sort of steady and flat narrative. I know it's based off a lot of the author's life and her experience with doing this, but I don't know, it's nothing major. If you just want something very easy and kind of sweet to read, this is cool, but it's not like there's a climax or anything. It was fun nonetheless, but it was nothing crazy, nothing intensely introspective, but it's just entertaining to read about how this woman breaks down people's personas and recommends books to them. It's a book about loving books, essentially. But yeah, I enjoyed it, but it was nothing crazy. And lastly, I wanted to just discuss my current reading stack that I've got going, which, we're gonna start off with this because I am still reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I know it's been a while. I'm getting to it, okay? I'm at the very end, okay? I'm in the last part, I think. I'm on part 6. I don't know if there's part 7. Oh, there's an epilogue, but a great book thus far. I am really enjoying it. I just have to be very much in the mood to read it. I was reading it this morning, and I think I might go down to the park and read some more of it. because the air is quite crisp and cool, and I think it's the perfect weather to read this right now. Hopefully I will get through it soon so I can really spew my thoughts on it. Something else I started reading is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And the reason why I started reading this is because I kept getting TikToks about people being like, this is one of the books you have to read in your lifetime. You have to read this. It's a must read. Just go read it right now. And I kept getting multiple videos about it. And in my head, even though I was like, I have plenty of books at home that I need to read, but then I was like, but the world is really telling me that I should pick this up right now. And so I went and I got it and I started reading it. I'm still in the very early stages, just because I've been trying to prioritize these other books that I've been getting through. That's okay. I think it's cool. It's not what I expected. Yes, I'm getting through that. I've also been reading Brutes. I forget the name of the author, but that book is with my friend right now because I forgot it with her. I've been enjoying it. I wish I had picked it up more during the summertime because it's very sultry, very mysterious. These girls kind of, the crows. These girls kind of get obsessed with the missing preacher's daughter, and it just follows that sort of vibe. If you enjoy Ethel Cain, I feel like it's a cool book to get into. If you know, you know. But I've been reading through that. I was so close to finishing it, but then I forgot it with my friend and I need to get it back. But that's okay. And then I also recently picked up I Spy Anna Kavan, which is, I got the little cloth-bound classic, which is so pretty. I had this on my reading list, but I told myself that I really wanted to read this during the wintertime when it's nice and cold. It's this sort of post-apocalyptic world surrounded by enclosing ice, and this character is in the pursuit to find this mysterious albino woman, and it's very cool. It's very sort of surrealist. It's been very interesting. I think the atmosphere of it all is very much wintry and dark and icy, and I've been enjoying it. I was reading this on the bus and I noticed a woman was trying to like get a peek of what I was reading because my facial expressions. But yes, those are all the books I've read so far this year. I've gotten through a pretty good stack in my opinion, and I've enjoyed most of these. There are some highlights here and there, but that's my little mid-year check-in. Hopefully maybe I've motivated you to maybe pick up some of these, or maybe I've demotivated you to put some of them down. Sorry. But yes, very excited for the rest of the year and all the other books I have to read and things that I'm anticipating to read. If you want a separate video on that, about my sort of TBR and books that I want to prioritize with reading next, let me know, because I will make that and maybe we can all read together the same books and we can. I hope you enjoyed the video. Follow me on Instagram at Longing for Literature if you want some more consistent posting. I fell off a little bit, but I'm gonna try and post more on there. And if you want to take part in, you know, polls and stuff on what I should film next, and if you just want to, you know, keep up with me, go follow me there. I hope you all have a beautiful, magical, wonderful day, and happy reading.